I'm going to walk through how I set up payments for my platform of agents using Stripe. To get started, here's my pricing page where I lay out 3 different subscription plans. Each subscription plan has a different number of AI credits that the user is allowed to redeem for that subscription period. Since my platform is for agents that perform different tasks, different agents will require different amounts of AI credits. So for example, the Maps agent, you can get around 5 image generations for 20 AI credits on this plan. Or for docs, you can get around 100 text completions for 20 AI credits. I laid it out this way so that I didn't have to create different subscription plans for each agent. Here I just have 3 subscription plans for the whole platform. It can be used for any number of agents. Also, I created a blog post covering the contents of this video, so if you'd like to, you can follow along with me in the blog. I use Stripe for my payments, and I recommend going through their quick start guide. In the quick start guide, you get basically an outline of all the steps that you need to do, along with relevant code snippets, so it makes it really easy to just get started with code. So I recommend going through their quick start guide, but now I'm going to cover a few things that I learned going through the process that might be helpful. So the first thing that happens is that the client creates a checkout session in Stripe. So specifically, the client sends a request to the backend server asking to create a checkout session using the Stripe API. The Stripe API sends back a URL that basically directs the user to a Stripe hosted checkout page. So for example, if I go back to my pricing page and I click this button called Get Starter, it'll send a backend request to create the checkout session, and then Stripe sends back the URL that the client then redirects. And this is the URL the client redirects to, which is the checkout session. In order to test it out, we need a test credit card, and thankfully Stripe has a couple that you can use. So I want to test the payment succeeds, so I'm going to copy this credit card, and then I'm going to use it in the checkout session. And then you can use any expiration date, any CVC. Before I subscribe, I want to head back over and cover a few more things about checkout session. So when you create the checkout session with the Stripe API, there's some parameters that you can pass in, and these are the ones that I use. And once again, this code is listed in the quick start guide, but I just want to call out a couple of things. So a success URL, so if the payment succeeds, this is where after subscribing in the checkout session, this is where your client redirects to. So I'd redirect it to the account page, which we'll see later. If it fails, I go back to the pricing page and then display an error at the top. One thing I really want to call out here is that I am passing in a user profile ID to the metadata, basically so that we can associate the Stripe customer ID with the user profile ID in my platform. Okay, so I'm going to go back and finish the subscription process. So the payment went through, but I missed an important step, so that's why we don't see an active subscription here. So the next piece of the puzzle is Stripe events, and I forgot to set up the listener, which is why the subscription didn't work. So there's a command that you can run that basically creates a tunnel from your local environment to Stripe, so that when certain events happen in Stripe, like a customer is created, an invoice is paid, those events are sent to your service. And then you have a webhook that basically is responsible for handling these events. So this command here, I'm using the Stripe CLI tool, and I'm telling Stripe to forward all events to this backend server, and specifically this URL. Which points to my webhook function. So I'm going to go over and run that command. Okay, so now we are listening to Stripe events. Okay, I've cleared the state and I'm gonna try again. Okay, cool. So now that worked, and the fix was that we needed to set up the Stripe tunnel that listens for events and forwards them to our webhook. I want to call out that I'm testing locally right now, which is why I had to run the Stripe tunnel locally. But for production, you need to specify in the Stripe dashboard where to send events, basically where your webhook function is. And you can find that here in the Stripe dashboard under the webhooks tab. So you can just add the endpoint where your webhook exists in production, and Stripe will know where to send the events to. So a couple of things occurred in our webhook function. So there's two events that I'm listening to. One is that the checkout session was completed. At that point, I know we have the Stripe customer ID, and I associate it with the user profile in my platform. The other event that I listen to is when the invoice has been paid. So at this point, I know it's safe to create a record of the usage that a user can now use once they have the subscription. So what is a usage record? Basically, it's a way for us to track how many credits a user has used and how many they have left to use for a specific billing period. So when we have this record in our platform, we know that if the user is about to complete an action they don't have enough credits for, we can basically display a message that says, hey, you've run out of AI credits, you can upgrade to continue this action. And if you saw earlier in the account page, we actually display the number of credits the user has left to use for that specific billing period. So the last thing I want to cover is managing a subscription. So sometimes users want to cancel their subscription or change their subscription plan, and they need a way to be able to do that. So luckily, Stripe makes it really easy. Very similar to creating the checkout session with the Stripe hosted URL, managing a subscription is just as easy. So if I click manage, what's going to happen is that Stripe creates a portal session, which is very similar to a checkout session. And likewise, it sends back a URL to the client, and the client actually redirects to this portal session where now as a user I can either cancel the subscription or update it. So I can change the plan. So this is really nice because Stripe has done all of the heavy lifting for us. So in Stripe, this is called the customer portal, and there's actually a few settings that you need to set up in order to enable this feature. So in the Stripe dashboard, you need to go to settings, billing, and then customer portal. But actually, if you are just testing if you're just testing locally, you want to make sure that you're in test mode in Stripe. So you come down here and do that. Okay, so now we can go to customer portal. So in order to allow the user to change subscriptions, you'll need to go down here to subscriptions. You'll need to turn this on right here and then add all of your plans that you want the user to be able to switch to and from. Once you've done that, make sure to go down and then click the Save Changes button, or else the changes won't take effect. And that's it. Thanks for watching.